Ever get that, shiver down your spine when you realize those safety regulations you've been, just skimming over?
Yeah.
They're not just red tape, right? They're actually about preventing real-life disasters.
Yeah.
And today we're going deep on something that, honestly, might seem kind of boring at first glance. Flame detector approvals. But trust me, it's crucial.
Oh, absolutely. It's about way more than just, ticking boxes on an inspection form.
Right.
Knowing the difference between, all those cryptic acronyms you see on a detector
Oh, yeah.
can be the difference between a minor fire and, a much bigger problem.
Exactly. And look, I'll admit, I used to be that person who just grabbed whatever smoke detector was cheapest,
Yeah.
But then I read this article about a factory fire, and their detector failed because it wasn't certified for the specific type of flammable materials they were using.
Oh, wow.
And it got me thinking.
Yeah, that's a perfect example of why these approvals matter. It's like you wouldn't buy a life jacket that, hasn't been tested for buoyancy, right?
Right.
These certifications are all about proving that this equipment, in this case, flame detectors, are going to work when you need them most.
Okay, so it's all about trust and knowing that someone's actually put these things through the ringer, right?
Exactly.
But where do you even start? I mean, the document you sent over had a whole alphabet soup of agencies. UL, FM, CSA, CNELEC.
Right.
Where do we even begin?
Yeah, you're not wrong. It can definitely feel overwhelming. But let's break it down. So here in North America, you'll see UL, that's Underwriters Laboratories, and FM approvals everywhere. Think of them as the gold standard for this side of the world.
Okay, so those are the big dogs for the U.S. and Canada?
Yeah.
What about if you're dealing with equipment from overseas?
Yeah, that's where things get even more interesting.
Okay.
On the global stage, the IEC, or the International Electrotechnical Commission, plays a huge role. They're all about establishing those international standards, kind of like the United Nations of electrical safety, if you will. And then in Europe, EN 5410 certification is essential, especially for fire alarm systems.
So if I see those names, no matter where a detector is made, I can be fairly confident it's at least met some baseline requirements.
You got it. They indicate that the equipment has gone through rigorous testing by, a third party, and that it meets certain safety and performance standards. It's like having an independent expert vouching for the product.
All right.
Speaking of which, you mentioned FM approvals earlier, and there's one specific standard, FM 3260, that's especially important in the world of flame detection.
Oh, yeah. That one popped up a few times in the document. What makes FM 3260 so special?
Well, it's all about those details I mentioned earlier. Not all fires are created equal, right?
Right.
You've got your smoldering fires, your flash fires fueled by different materials.
Right.
FM 3260 sets incredibly specific performance requirements and testing protocols for flame detectors used in fire alarm systems. It ensures they can actually detect the type of fire they are designed for in a variety of, challenging scenarios.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all situation.
Yeah.
You got to match the right detector to the specific risks of that environment.
Exactly. Using a detector that's not, designed for a particular type of fire is like using a hammer when you really need a screwdriver.
Right.
It might seem like it works on the surface, but in the long run, it's not going to get the job done properly. And the consequences can be far more serious.
That's a great way to put it. So we've talked about UL, FM approvals, and how those are big in North America.
Yeah.
You also mentioned the IEC, which sounds like they wield a lot of influence globally. What's one of their key standards in the world of flame detection?
Well, one they're known for is IEC 61508.
Okay.
It's a mouthful.
Yeah.
But it essentially boils down to what they call functional safety. It's about making sure that any system designed for safety, and that includes those with flame detectors, minimizes risk throughout its entire lifespan.
So from the moment someone starts sketching out the design on a napkin,
Yeah.
to the moment that detector is retired, they're thinking about safety at every stage.
Yeah, precisely. It's a holistic approach to risk management, which is really crucial when you're dealing with systems that are literally responsible for saving lives. And that kind of rigor is essential, especially in today's, globalized world, where equipment could be designed in one country, manufactured in another, and installed on the other side of the planet.
It's like a global safety standard that ensures everyone's on the same page no matter where they are.
Yeah.
It's funny because when I think about safety standards, I often think about how different countries approach things like building codes or food safety regulations.
Yeah.
And how those vary so much.
And you're absolutely right to make that connection. Those variations exist in the world of fire safety as well. That's why we have these regional standards like the European Union's EN 5410 that you mentioned earlier.
Right. So EN 5410 is kind of like the European equivalent of FM 3260.
Yeah.
They both deal specifically with flame detectors in fire alarm systems, but like tailored to their respective regions.
That's a great way to think about it. And having those regional standards is important because they take into account like local regulations, industry practices, even things like the types of buildings and industries that are, prevalent in particular areas.
It's like those travel adapters. You need to use different electrical outlets around the world.
Right.
You need the right one to plug in and get things working safely and effectively. So we've got North America covered. We've talked about Europe, and we know the IEC is doing their thing globally.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other major players we should have on our radar?
Absolutely. Each region of the world tends to have its own, set of standards and organizations dedicated to safety.
Right.
For example, here in Canada, we've got the CSA group, that's the Canadian Standards Association. They play a similar role to UL in the U.S.
Okay.
And then there's VDS, a German certification body, but they're internationally recognized, known for their really strict testing procedures when it comes to fire protection and safety products.
It's like the German reputation for precision engineering applied to safety standards.
Exactly. And because they collaborate with a lot of international partners, having that VDS certification can be a significant advantage for, manufacturers trying to break into that global market.
Yeah.
It's a powerful signal that a product meets those stringent safety requirements no matter where it's sold. And of course, we can't forget about national standards organizations like BSI in the United Kingdom, Standards Australia, JFEII in Japan.
Right.
Each country has its own set of rules and regulations in place to make sure, things are built to a certain standard.
It sounds like a lot to keep track of.
It can be, but that's why it's, helpful to understand that basic landscape of these organizations and what they represent. Ultimately, they all contribute to that global web of safety we were talking about earlier, ensuring, a baseline level of quality and reliability no matter where a product originates.
It's fascinating to think about how interconnected it all is. But with so many different standards and certifications, is there ever any, overlap? Or do these organizations typically, stick to their own lanes?
That's a great question. There's definitely some overlap, and in some cases, certifications can complement each other. For example, a flame detector might be both UL listed and FM approved, meaning it meets the requirements of both organizations.
Okay.
And some standards, like those from the IEC, are internationally recognized and can even influence how those national standards are developed in different countries.
So it's not always about choosing one standard over another. Sometimes it's about having multiple layers of assurance.
Exactly. It's about finding the right balance for your specific needs and ensuring that the equipment you choose has been thoroughly vetted by, reputable organizations.
This has been incredibly eye-opening. We've covered so much ground, from the, crucial role of these approvals to the major players on the global stage. It's clear that a lot of work goes into ensuring these detectors are up to snuff. But beyond the acronyms and technical jargon, what does all of this actually mean for the average person?
Yeah.
I mean, how do these certifications translate into tangible benefits? It's easy to get lost in the weeds, right, with all the different agencies and standards and everything. But at the end of the day, what matters most is that people are safe.
Absolutely. That's where those tangible benefits come into play. We've talked about the importance of, reducing the risk of fires, but it goes beyond that.
Right. You mentioned insurance advantages, which is always a plus. But what about something like business continuity? I imagine having, certified equipment could make a huge difference if there is a fire.
You're spot on. If a fire does occur, having those reliable certified detectors can mean the difference between a small contained incident and a major catastrophe.
Right.
That means less downtime, less property damage, and potentially fewer legal headaches down the line.
So it's not just about preventing fires altogether, but also about minimizing the damage if one does happen.
Exactly. Think of it as a multi-layered safety net.
Yeah.
And from a business perspective, that kind of proactive risk management can be a real game changer.
It's like they say, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Though in this case, that ounce of prevention could also be protecting lives.
Couldn't agree more. That's what makes these certifications so crucial. They represent a real commitment to safety, a commitment to quality, and ultimately a commitment to protecting what matters most.
Well said. So for anyone listening who might be feeling a little overwhelmed by all the, acronyms and technicalities,
Yeah.
just remember the big picture, right?
Right.
It's about trust, safety, and peace of mind.
Absolutely. Don't hesitate to, ask questions, do your research, and make sure you really understand the level of protection your equipment offers. It's worth it.
Because a little knowledge about these approvals can go a long way in making the world a safer place.
100%.
And on that note, we'll leave you with something to ponder. We've spent this episode, this deep dive, really exploring these different standards and certifications and how they ensure the quality and dependability of flame detectors.
Right.
But how can we make this type of information more readily available and, understandable for everyone? Because when it comes to safety, no one should be left in the dark.
That's an important question. Maybe there are ways to simplify this information, make it more user-friendly,
Right.
and empower individuals and businesses to make more informed decisions about fire safety. Everyone deserves to feel safe and secure.
Absolutely. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the intricate world of flame detector approvals. Thanks for joining us.